Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Israel to ease Gaza siege. Allawi insists he's the winner in the Iraqi elections. And the Saudi royal family monopolizes real estate. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now. The Israeli government has announced what it referred to as measures aimed at easing the land siege on Gaza, but did not lift it.
The Israeli ministerial cabinet voted on allowing all food items to enter Gaza and specified a list of banned items, saying that they may be used to enhance Hamas's fighting capabilities.
The Israeli government also decided to increase the amount of cement and iron that can enter Gaza, but only under the supervision of international organizations.
Ilyas Karam reports on the reactions generated by the Israeli government's decision.
So the
siege that has been imposed on Gaza will not be lifted, and it does not change much. Israel will continue to control what 1.5 million Palestinians can eat. The Israeli Security Cabinet voted to increase the list of items that can enter Gaza without including the details. It specified a list of banned items, saying that they can be used by Hamas for bomb making, items such as fertilizer, metal pipes and screws. The statement that was released by the Security Cabinet indicates that the amount of cement and iron that will be allowed into Gaza will be increased, as long as it is used by the UN for construction projects. The Israeli public expressed mixed reactions to these new measures.
This is not the time to ease the siege. There is no hunger in Gaza. We saw over the internet that they have sweets and chocolate. They have everything they need.
I think that the list of items that can be used for civilian purposes can be increased, as long as observers are in place to ensure that weapons do not get into Gaza.
The Israeli government did not decide on whether to place international observers in the border crossing points. Also, it did not specify whether they will be opened on a regular basis. In addition, Palestinians in Gaza are still not allowed to go into the West Bank. The ousted Palestinian government, as well as the Palestinian Authority, criticise Israel over this issue.
This is a useless attempt to fool the citizens. We want an end to the siege, and we want all crossing points to be reopened.
They use food, medicine, and fuel as weapons against our people in Gaza. Therefore, we demand that the siege be completely lifted.
The Israeli government has refused to ease the naval siege on Gaza, saying that Gaza's port will become an Iranian military port for the smuggling of weapons. They also say that it will become an advanced base for Hezbollah on its southern border with Israel. International pressure was not the only reason for which Israel decided to ease the siege on Gaza. The siege failed to achieve its political and strategic objectives. The Palestinians did not rebel against Hamas, and Hamas did not surrender or give up its authority. Also, the siege did not help Israel bring back its soldier who was captured by Hamas. Ilyas Karam, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
Russia has sharply criticised the EU's decision to impose unilateral sanctions against Iran. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rybakov says Moscow's extremely disappointed with the move. The announcement came after EU leaders said they'll impose tougher sanctions on Iran's gas and oil sector over Tehran's nuclear energy program. The punitive measures will also target Iran's transportation, banking and insurance sectors. Moscow also slammed Washington over its new unilateral sanctions against Tehran. Last week, the UN Security Council passed a fourth round of sanctions against Iran. More reaction now. Iran's parliament speaker says the EU's unilateral sanctions against Tehran will never change his country's stance on its nuclear energy program. Ali Larijani says any EU move against Iran will naturally lead to retaliatory actions. But he added that the West's acts should not anger Iran enough to exit the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Larijani also said Iran, Brazil and Turkey's nuclear fuel swap declaration is still on the agenda, despite the new round of UN Security Council sanctions. And the head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran says Russia is working hard to complete the nuclear power plant in the south of his country.
I'm happy to say that our Russian partners are working very hard. If there has been any delay in the coming into operation of the Bushehr power plant, this delay has been mainly due to technical problems. I disagree with some statements that have been made on Bushehr that the delay emanates from political reasons.
In an interview with Press TV, Salehi said 3,000 Russians are working to swiftly solve technical problems. This, he added, so the Bushehr nuclear plant can be launched in due time. Earlier this month, the Russian Prime Minister said the facility will come online in August. Salehi also spoke about Iran, Turkey and Brazil's nuclear fuel swap declaration. He expressed hope that it will eventually open a door to fair negotiations between Iran and the Vienna Group. The latter consists, of course, of the US, Russia, France and the IAEA.
نحو المزيد من الغموض يتجه ملف تشكيل الحكومة العراقية المعلق في
3 months after the elections, the Iraqi government has still not been formed, making the situation even more ambiguous. In a new development, the head of the Arabiya list, Iyad Allawi, reiterated that his party refuses to give up its right to form the upcoming government. He accused the new coalition that was formed by the Iraqi National Alliance, led by Amr al-Hakim, and the State of Law coalition, led by Nouri al-Maliki, of threatening Iraq's unity with sectarianism. Allawi's statements come 2 days before the first parliamentary session is set to take place and reflect the new political map. The newly formed coalition will become the biggest parliamentary bloc with 159 representatives. In addition, the Kurdish alliance, which holds 40 parliamentary seats, may join and give the newly formed coalition a lead over the Iraqi list. The Iraqi list is now threatened with losing its right to nominate the prime minister of the upcoming government.
بفقدان حق ترشيح اسم رئيس الحكومة المقبلة.
في مصر أوقف أخوان أمريكيان من أصل صومالي أثناء عودتهما.
2 Somali-American brothers were detained last month in Egypt while en route to the U.S. from Yemen via Cairo. The 2 brothers were questioned by the FBI and the Egyptian authorities. 6 weeks after their ordeal, one of the brothers remained stranded in Egypt because his name appears on the U.S. no-fly list.
when he was born and he born in Fairfax.
أرادت شمسة وحيلي أن يدرس ابنيها يحيى ويوسف.
Shamsa Wahili wanted her 2 US-born sons, Yahya and Yusuf, to study Arabic and live in a new environment in Yemen. However, she didn't expect what would happen next. The 2 brothers were detained and questioned by Egyptian security authorities upon returning to the US from Yemen via Cairo. While Yusuf was allowed to return to the US, Yahya has been stranded in Egypt for nearly 6 weeks. Yusuf said that the FBI, along with an Egyptian detective, interrogated him.
Why does your brother have a beard? I'm like, what do you mean?
They asked me why my brother has a beard and if he likes bin Laden. I told them that we hate bin Laden and his kind. They asked me what he was doing with bin Laden. They asked me to identify some suspects and pictures. I told them I didn't know any of them. They asked me very dumb questions.
Some very dumb questions.
Yusuf said he was detained for 4 days and that he was not allowed to contact the U.S. Embassy, his family, or a lawyer. He added that the Egyptian prison guards kicked him every time he tried to fall asleep in his cell. The detective wanted to know what kind of relationship exists between the 2 brothers and some U.S. citizens in Yemen accused of being affiliated with Al-Qaeda. However, the two brothers were not charged with any crimes. The U.S. Embassy in Cairo has revoked Yahya's passport.
They issued me another passport that is only valid for travel to the U.S. They informed me that my name appears on the no-fly list.
مؤسسات الحقوق المدنية تقول إن القضية تتجاوز الأخوين وأن لديها
Human rights organizations said that the case goes beyond the two brothers and that they have examples that show a disturbing pattern. The U.S. is sending wanted individuals to other countries for questioning so they can be interrogated without due process or their constitutional rights, including the right to have an attorney. The Council on American-Islamic Relations said that placing Yahya on the no-fly list constitutes a mandatory expulsion from his native country.
I miss you so much.
عائلة الوحيلي تقول إنها
The Wahili family says that they are like any other American family. One of its members has served in the U.S. Army in Iraq. The family also donated money and volunteered in Obama's election campaign. They said they shouldn't be treated like second-class citizens. While the FBI declined to directly comment on the Wahili case, it did note that the failed bombing attempts on Christmas Day and in Times Square are reminders of the need to remain vigilant.
My son come home.
I want my son to come home. I want him to be questioned here.
Mona Shakakia, Al-Arabiya, Burke, Virginia.
يواجه العالم اليوم تحديات عديدة.
The world today faces many challenges that include the spread of nuclear weapons, regional conflicts, economic uncertainties, as well as the threat posed by drug trafficking.
من الضوء على هذه القضايا يسرنا أن نستضيف معنا نائب رئيس الوزراء الروسي السيد سيرجي إيفانوف.
To shed light on these issues, joining us is Russian Deputy Prime Minister Sergei Ivanov. Thank you for joining us. The war in Afghanistan is still going on. What is the significance of the threats coming from that part of the world?
There's not yet a credible
First of all, we do not have a real government in Afghanistan that has the complete support of the Afghan people. Second, NATO forces do not have control over all of Afghanistan. The third point is related to drugs. I presented a proposal to fight drugs. Afghanistan is the main source of these drugs because it produces 95% of the world's heroin. This must be considered an international crime for several reasons. First, it is clear that a large percentage of the revenue generated by warlords and drug traffickers is used to support terrorism. Second, these funds, of course, go across the border to Pakistani tribal regions. It has become clear that terrorists are using these funds to plan terrorist attacks, not only in Afghanistan and neighboring countries, including Russia, but also in faraway countries. I'm referring here to the failed terror attempt in New York.
Turning to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the latest attack on the Freedom Flotilla highlighted the fragility of the situation in the region. Do you see any hope in the resolution of this conflict that has lasted decades?
Eventually, there's simply no other.
Eventually, there is no other way. It is clear that the situation is unacceptable and must be corrected. New mechanisms that allow the entry of aid into Gaza must be found. At the same time, the legitimate Israeli right to defend its security must also be taken into account.
ونحن طبعا شاهدنا مسبقا أمثلة عديدة عن هجمات صاروخية على الأراضي الإسرائيلية.
Of course, we have seen many missile attacks against Israeli areas from Gaza. It is important that these missiles stop. Israel is a country, and it has all the rights to defend itself. It must also live in peace with its neighbors.
ولكن من ناحية أخرى فإن الحصار الذي تفرضه إسرائيل على غزة لا يساعد.
However, the siege that Israel is imposing on Gaza does not help integrate Gaza into the rest of the independent Palestinian state, as was previously agreed upon. We believe that the West Bank is headed in the right direction and is increasingly developing, while Gaza is isolated. Humanitarian, social, and economic problems as well as terrorism are growing there.
And its own security.
أكد خالد مشعل رئيس المكتب السياسي لحركة حماس.
The chair of the Hamas political bureau, Khalid Mashal, said that the latest Zionist action that dealt with the Freedom Flotilla has started to create an atmosphere and environment that is stirring the world's anger against the Zionist entity. Mashal attributed that shift in the world's position to the resistance, as opposed to the useless negotiations.
The Zionist practice in the July 2006 war, the 2008-2009 war on Gaza, the criminal attack on the Freedom Flotilla, the repeated Israeli crimes in Jerusalem and the Aqsa Mosque, the separation wall, the settlements, and the assassinations. All these criminal acts have started to create a new political climate and environment at the international level, stemming from the world's anger against Israel. Israel, which was until today an untouchable state, has found some to criticize it over its heinous practices. Israel, which has marketed itself in the world as a victim of the Holocaust, is committing its own Holocaust against the Palestinian people.
A
massive funeral procession was held in occupied Jerusalem for Ziad al-Julani, a young Palestinian martyr who was shot to death by the occupation forces in the area of Wadi al-Jos. Al-Julani was martyred under the pretext that he tried to run over 2 Zionist soldiers. However, the Research and Documentation Unit of the Jerusalem Center for Social and Economic Rights said that the Zionist occupation forces shot al-Julani execution-style at point-blank range after hitting him.
He was directly hit by a bullet, causing him to fall to the ground, unable to move. This is when the second bullet was discharged at point-blank range, hitting al-Julani in the face and penetrating his jaw. This didn't stop here, as al-Julani was hit by a third bullet to the abdomen. This time al-Julani laid on the ground motionless, with the Zionists dancing in joy next to his body, a celebration over the killing of an Arab. That's how eyewitnesses described the murder of martyred Ziad Mohammed al-Julani, a Palestinian resident from the Shafat neighborhood in occupied Jerusalem. The occupation army said that al-Julani attempted to run over several soldiers when he was shot. However, the evidence on the ground has shown otherwise. It was a deliberate execution carried out by the Zionist occupation forces, who opened fire on al-Julani upon stopping his car. The occupation army also opened fire on those who tried to help al-Julani. The martyr, who worked as a merchant and is survived by his 4 daughters, was not the first Jerusalemite to be executed in cold blood. In the past few years, a string of murders was committed in Jerusalem against Arab residents. In one of the incidents, Amjad Abu Khudair, a young Palestinian martyr, was shot to death by an Israeli settler near the Hebron gate. Rabia Tawil, a Palestinian young man, was executed while driving his car at an Israeli checkpoint in Jerusalem. Wael Karwai from Tur met the same fate. He was beaten to death in a Zionist detention center in occupied Jerusalem. Between forced migration and execution, the Jerusalemites are determined to stay in their homes and land, amidst ongoing Israeli violations on one side and Arab failure to protect them on the other.
Thousands of ultra-Orthodox demonstrators gathered in Bnei Brak and Jerusalem today to protest a high court ruling against the discrimination between girls of Ashkenazi and Sephardi descent at the Beit Yaakov school in Emmanuel. Here to update us with the details is IBA's Eli Wogelenter.
Yes, Aaron, tens of thousands of Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jews are staging mass demonstrations today to protest a Supreme Court ruling forcing the integration of a religious girls' school. Traffic was snarled in Jerusalem and Bnei Brak as demonstrators waved posters slamming the court's decision and proclaiming the supremacy of religious law. There were no reports of violence. The issue is long-standing. The parents of Ashkenazi schoolgirls in Emmanuel from the Slonim sect of Hasidim don't want their children to study with some Sephardi schoolgirls because, they argue, those girls aren't religious enough. The Supreme Court rejected that argument and told the parents that the school must be integrated. The court further ruled that the 43 sets of parents who had defied the integration efforts by keeping their daughters from school were to be jailed today for 2 weeks. Hence the demonstrations, including signs that said the Supreme Court is fascist. Nearly all the major leaders in the Ashkenazi Haredi religious community, both from the Lithuanian and Hasidic communities, attended the rallies, which police estimated at 50,000 in Jerusalem and 20,000 in Bnei Brak. Meanwhile, in a bid to calm tensions, President Shimon Peres met this morning with Deputy Education Minister Meir Porush, a member of the ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazi party United Torah Judaism, and with Rabbi Yitzchak David Grossman in a last-minute bid to prevent the mass Haredi protests planned for across the country. A spokesman for Peres said that Rabbi Porush broke into tears during the meeting and told the president that he felt the family's pain and expressed the strong desire to prevent the parents' imprisonment. What's interesting is that Sephardi religious leaders have not publicly criticized the demonstration or the parents' conduct, suggesting a reluctance to drive a wedge within the ultra-Orthodox community. The court had first ruled that the parents of Haredi schoolgirls had until 1 o'clock this afternoon to appear at the central Jerusalem lockup to begin serving their 2-week sentence. That order was then postponed until this hour, and we're awaiting word on whether they indeed show up for their stay in prison. The head rabbi of the Slonim Haredim, Rabbi Shmuel Brzezowski, met with the parents last night and ordered only the men to report to the police station. However, the court effectively ordered both parents to appear at the station unless an explicit appeal is filed with the court, in which case it will be examined and then decided upon. Police have denied claims that a deal has been reached by which only the men will be imprisoned while the women remain at home. The court did make an exception for mothers of disabled children in Emmanuel. Aaron?
Okay, Ellie, thank you for that report. And joining us now by telephone from the religious neighborhood of Bnei Brak outside of Tel Aviv is IBA reporter Efrat Batat. Efrat, what can you tell us about the residents' mood where you are?
Well, Aaron, the atmosphere here in Bnei Brak is extremely tense. Since the afternoon hours, shortly after 1 p.m., thousands, and I mean literally thousands of local Bnei Brak residents began gathering in the streets. At this hour, protesters are out in full force. The last assessment I received from police officials was that there are over 20,000 participants. The streets are completely blocked off to traffic. A short time ago, on the corner of Chazon Ish and Rabbi Akiva Street, where I was standing, the demonstrators pushed through the crowd, carrying signs that read that the High Court is fascist. Very young demonstrators, perhaps, and I'm guessing, as young as 10 years old, are carrying signs that say, "Have you no shame?"
A number of Saudi civil and governmental institutions have sounded alarm bells over the suffocating housing crisis looming in the kingdom, warning that if not contained, it will turn into a serious social crisis. According to the latest figures by the International Finance Corporation, an agency affiliated with the World Bank, Saudi Arabia is home to one of the most complicated housing crises in the world. Experts attribute the crisis to the fact that the royal family owns most of the private land in the kingdom.
فرضت أزمة الإسكان نفسها على الوضع الاقتصادي الراهن في السعودية.
The housing crisis has cast its shadow on the overall economic situation in Saudi Arabia, despite the fluctuating figures of family-owned homes, with 45% being the highest according to government figures. All of the studies have shown a shortfall in housing units in major Saudi cities, such as Riyadh, Dammam, and Jeddah. The economic stalemate triggered by the housing and dire living conditions in Saudi Arabia seems to be spiraling out of control like wildfire and can't be contained by government officials' empty promises. Saudi experts said that it's not enough to only make plans and set aside large sums of money for housing projects when, in reality, they are never executed under the pretext of land shortage.
هي عدم توفر أراضٍ محل دون البدء في تنفيذ تلك المشاريع.
Meanwhile, the Saudi regime continues to launch major development projects across the kingdom, especially in Jeddah and Riyadh. Most of the development projects are taking place on large plots of land owned by the Saudi royal family. It seems ironic to find government employees and members of the military institution living in rental homes in a country like Saudi Arabia. Observers believe that the housing crisis is being fueled by the high inflation and unemployment rates. Nearly 70% of Saudi citizens live in rental homes, not to mention the high cost of living, the high unemployment rate, and the lack of public services, in addition to the administrative corruption that is plaguing the Saudi government-run institutions. The average Saudi citizen does not stand a chance in the Saudi real estate market, where he has to compete head-to-head with the emirs of the royal family. The Saudi royal family owns oil resources and revenues, accounting for $700 million a day, according to current oil prices. Nearly half of the Saudi population is living near the poverty line, placing it at a crippling disadvantage against their royal counterparts. According to knowledgeable sources, the housing crisis is also being fueled by the deteriorating social and political situation, as the middle class continues to lose ground. Saudi Arabia needs nearly $320 billion over the next 10 years to close the deficit in the housing units. The annual shortfall is being estimated at 200,000 housing units, mostly for the middle and lower classes.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online, stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.